Hey everyone, it's your guy back in front of the camera. So here's the deal. The world's first amphibious assault ship equipped with an electromagnetic catapult. The Type 076 just wrapped up its sea trials. Combat capability is still being polished, but over in the military fan circles, they're already going nuts over rumors of the next-gen Type 077. Tonnage literally doubled, specs practically maxed out. This rumored 80,000-ton sea monster. What gives it the right to overturn the U.S. amphibious warfare doctrine that we have relied on for decades? From the 40,000-ton 076 as a pathfinder, ironing out the kinks, to the 80,000-ton 077 in full maturity, this kind of leapfrog upgrade in their amphibious equipment. What exactly is the military-industrial strategy hiding behind it? And more importantly, as Americans, why should we give a damn? Because this isn't some distant curiosity, this is a direct challenge to the naval supremacy we've taken for granted since World War II. And we'd better start paying attention for anyone who follows naval hardware closely. You know that the 076 already shattered a century-old global development pattern for amphibious ships. Before this thing came along, every single amphibious assault ship on the planet had only two core playbooks. Either you rely on helicopters for vertical troop insertion, or you bolt on a V-STOL jet like the F-35 Bravo to patch in some airstrike capability. That was it. That was the entire menu. No one ever dared to put an electromagnetic catapult and an arresting gear system on an amphibious deck. Why? Because the technical challenges are insane. The power draw, the heat dissipation, the integration with a hull that was never designed for carrier-style aviation. It's a nightmare. But they did it anyway. The Defense Ministry's public statement made it absolutely clear. The 076 innovatively applies electromagnetic catapult and arrestor technology, and it can routinely operate fixed-wing aircraft, all types of helicopters, and a full suite of amphibious combat gear. In plain English, this is the first amphibious assault ship on God's green earth that can pull off a carrier's job. Think about that for a second. A hull that's supposed to put Marines on a beach can now generate its own air superiority, launch strike packages, and control the skies above the battle space, all without a supercarrier hovering nearby. A decade ago, who in their right mind would have thought that a ship designed for beach landings could have the fixed wing launch and long-range strike capability of a full-deck carrier? Nobody, not the Pentagon, not the naval analysts, not the think tanks in DC. And yet, here we are. CCTV's coverage of the Sichuan ship's sea trials confirmed it. Propulsion, electrical systems, and the catapult all passed comprehensive reliability testing, officially marking their amphibious forces' entry into what they call the electric catapult era. That's not propaganda, that's a fact, and we ignore it at our peril. But behind all that glory, the 076's built-in limitations are now fully exposed as sea trials get deeper. And that's exactly the core reason their military-industrial side is rushing the 077 into development. This is the part where the story gets really interesting, because it shows you exactly how they think. They don't rest on their laurels, they don't declare victory and move on. They find the weakness, and they fix it immediately. A lot of people assume the 076's weak spot is tonnage, but that's not it at all. The real Achilles heel is that its entire electrical power system simply can't keep up with high-intensity, real-world combat demands. And that's a huge deal, because in modern naval warfare, electricity is everything. It's not just about launching planes anymore, it's about radars, jammers, sensors, comms, the whole 9 yards. Think about it for a second. Why would a state-of-the-art electromagnetic catapult warship experience power drop-offs on critical equipment during high-tempo operations? The answer is buried in its power plant configuration based on publicly available tender documents and ship specs. And yes, we actually have this data. The 076 uses a 2-gas turbine plus 6 diesel combo. That's 2 21 megawatt gas turbines paired with 6 megawatt diesel generator sets, giving a full load total power of roughly 78 to 80 megawatts. That number looks big on paper, and for daily routine operations, it's perfectly adequate. But the moment you hit that electromagnetic catapult, which draws a massive instantaneous spike, the weakness blows up instantly. Let me give you a simple analogy that anyone can understand. Flinging a 30-ton fixed-wing fighter off the deck eats up well over half of the ship's total electrical output in a split second. It's like trying to start a freight train with a motorcycle battery. It just doesn't work at scale. For low-frequency training runs, you can just barely manage. But once you go into open ocean, high-intensity combat with the operational tempo cranked up and continuous high-rate launches, the entire ship's power grid goes into deficit mode immediately. To keep the catapult running, You're forced to throttle down the ESA radar, the electronic warfare suite, the close-in weapon systems, the communications gear, and the detection arrays, or even shut off secondary equipment entirely. In plain English, that means the ship goes blind deaf. And defenseless also it can keep slinging jets. It's like using an underpowered charger to juice up your phone, tablet, headphones, and power bank all at once. None of them ever gets a full charge, and at the critical moment, everything might shut down. In other words, the 076's combat ceiling is hard-locked by its electrical output. It can handle near-shore power projection and basic missions without much trouble, but it simply cannot sustain high-intensity, open-ocean, prolonged slugfests. And let's be honest, that's exactly the kind of fight we'd expect in a Pacific theater. In modern naval combat, if your radar is one step behind, or your electronic warfare is one notch weaker, you're essentially inviting enemy fire. And if your sortie generation is constrained, you're directly gutting your core striking power. It is precisely because this power bottleneck can't be fixed through later retrofits that their military-industrial establishment decisively initiated a next-gen iteration. This is where the 077 comes in, and this is where the story gets really alarming from an American perspective. The 077's design philosophy is brutally clear. Swap out the core power plant and kill the power deficiency at the root. No half measures, no band-aids, no incremental tweaks. They went straight for the jugular. It no longer uses the 076's engine combo. Instead, it upgrades to much larger gas turbines and beefier diesel gensets, pushing total generating capacity to multiple times that of the 076. We're talking about a power plant that can sustain high-intensity combat without breaking a sweat. Once you have abundant electricity, the improvement cascade is across the board. The most obvious leap is catapult capability. The 076, constrained by its power budget, could only install a single electromagnetic launch rail, a compromise they had to make. But that single rail isn't just a drag on sortie efficiency. The bigger issue is single point of failure risk. In a chaotic battlefield, if that one and only catapult track gets hit by enemy fire or suffers a mechanical breakdown, and let's face it, equipment breaks in combat all the time. Every single fixed wing bird on that deck is grounded. And an amphibious ship without airstrike or air cover in a contested maritime environment is nothing more than a drifting target. It's a sitting duck, waiting to be turned into scrap metal. Modern naval warfare is all about redundancy and sustained combat output. A single point of failure that paralyzes your core combat capability is simply unacceptable in any serious design. The 077 avoids that trap perfectly. It carries two parallel, fully independent electromagnetic catapult tracks, separate power feeds, separate control circuits, separate operation, completely isolated from each other. You could lose one entire track to a missile strike or a mechanical failure, and the other keeps humming along like nothing happened. How much of a boost does this design bring? On one hand, redundancy doubles. In real combat, if one track gets knocked out, the other keeps launching without a hitch, so your fixed wing operations never skip a beat. On the other hand, dual-track simultaneous operations let you double your per hour and per day sortie rates, allowing you to seize air superiority and deliver land attack and anti-ship strikes at a tempo the 076 can't even dream of. We're talking about the difference between a nuisance and a knockout punch. And because the power system is so much more robust, the 077 also has built-in headroom for future combat upgrades. Things like laser close-in defense, high-power microwave weapons, and other directed energy systems, which demand enormous electrical reserves. The 076 simply doesn't have the margin, but the 077's surplus capacity handles them with ease, pushing its point defense interception and active engagement capabilities to a whole new level. In other words, the 077 isn't just better than the 076, it's future-proofed for the next generation of warfare. That power upgrade also allows the 077's hull to expand dramatically. Taking tonnage to a completely different league, let's do a direct comparison that every American viewer can understand. The U.S. Navy's most advanced amphibious assault ship currently in service is the America class with a full load displacement of 45,000 tons, widely considered the global benchmark for traditional amphibs. That's our crown jewel, our flagship of the amphibious fleet, the brand new 077. Its full load displacement is said to exceed 80,000 tons, more than double the America class. Let that sink in. They're building an amphibious assault ship that's bigger than many of our aircraft carriers. But here's the thing. A lot of people only see the superficial advantage of bigger tonnage, completely missing the fundamental gap in design philosophy between US and Chinese amphibious ships. And that gap is precisely why the 077 has the potential to upend the US playbook. The US Navy has always treated its amphibious assault ships as supporting pieces of the carrier strike group, trailing behind the big deck carrier to provide aviation support and troop lift. In fact, they went so far as to remove the traditional well deck entirely on some of these ships, abandoning heavy landing operations to fully focus on the F-35 Bravos vertical landing capability. That was a conscious choice, and it has consequences. The problem is, once that kind of ship operates without carrier cover, its survivability drops off a cliff. It has no independent air dominance capability and no real amphibious assault function. It's a one-dimensional platform. The 077, by contrast, takes a completely different path. It's built for independent, omnidirectional operations. That 80,000-ton hull gives it immense internal volume, allowing it to carry a full-size flight deck, an oversized hangar, vast ammunition storage for multiple mission types, and at the same time retain a fully functional, well-equipped well deck for amphibious landings. That gives the 077 a genuinely unique all-in-one profile. It can launch and recover fixed wing strike aircraft just like a full deck carrier, independently seizing air superiority and delivering deep strikes. It can deploy armored vehicles, landing craft, and troops, just like a classic amphib. And its surplus power and advanced sensor suite enable it to conduct area air defense and electronic countermeasures on its own. It can attack, project, defend, and operate entirely independently, a combat profile that the America class can never, ever replicate. And that should worry every single one of us, because it means they're not trying to beat us at our own game, they're changing the game entirely. But a top-tier hull alone isn't enough. You need a tailored air wing to go with it. The 077 also comes with a completely new ship-based aircraft system, specifically designed to fill the gaps in their current naval aviation lineup. As it stands, their carrier-based aviation is tiered pretty clearly. At the high end, you have the J-35 stealth fighter, which handles beyond visual range air combat and precision deep strikes. Think of it as their answer to our F-35 Charlie. In the unmanned domain, the Attack 11 handles reconnaissance, surveillance, and low observable penetration missions, essentially their version of our stealthy drones. But in the bread and butter tactical arena, there's been a very obvious gap. Think about the practical pain point in real combat. The J-35 is incredibly expensive to produce, and its service life is precious, using it for routine patrols, close air support, low altitude suppression, and other basic tasks is just throwing money away and wasting your premier assets. It's like using a Ferrari to deliver pizzas. It can do it. But why would you? Meanwhile, the Attack 11 doesn't have the maneuverability to handle close and air intercepts. So you've got this gap in the middle, a need for a workhorse, a blue-collar fighter that can do the dirty work without breaking the bank. That's where the purpose-built little Wasp carrier-based aircraft, tailored specifically for the 077, comes in and perfectly plugs that hole. It's derived from a proven trainer platform, so it's cheap to produce, easy to maintain, highly reliable, and suitable for mass deployment. Don't let the trainer-derived label fool you. Its combat capability is no joke. It retains solid precision strike capability against land and sea targets, and it also has basic air-to-air combat, low altitude penetration, and short-range interception capability. Once you pair this little Wasp with the 077's dual electromagnetic catapults, the operational model comes together beautifully. The little Wasp handles all the daily grind patrols, close air support, low altitude intercept, with low operating costs and high sortie generation, while the J-35 is reserved exclusively for high-end air superiority missions. Stealth penetration and countering enemy frontline fighters, high-end and low-end complementing each other, each doing exactly what it does best, maximizing both combat effectiveness and sustained operational endurance. Now compare that to the US Amphibious assault ship air wing model, and the advantage is obvious. No US amphib has an electromagnetic catapult. They have to rely entirely on the F-35 Bravos vertical takeoff capability to generate air power. Vertical takeoff looks flexible and sexy, but here's the catch: to make vertical takeoff possible, the fighter has to shed serious weight. Reducing internal fuel and weapons payload. Publicly available data shows that in vertical takeoff mode, the F-35 Bravos payload shrinks by about 30%, and its combat radius gets slashed dramatically. So you end up paying top dollar for a stealth fighter. But you only get the combat output of a tactical striker. It's like buying a Lamborghini and only being able to drive it in first gear. China, on the other hand, completely sidesteps that V-Fi stole technical trap by using electromagnetic catapults. They can routinely launch conventional fixed-wing fighters at full takeoff weight, with maximum payload, full fuel, full combat radius, full maneuverability, and high sortie generation, outperforming the US approach in every single metric. It's a generational paradigm shift in how amphibious warfare is fought, and we are currently on the wrong side of that shift. If you trace the entire iterative lineage from start to finish, you can see it clearly. The 3-ship progression 075, 076, 077 perfectly embodies their military-industrial philosophy of small steps, fast runs, iterative refinement. Each generation surgically addresses the core shortcomings of its predecessor, building on the lessons learned in a closed-loop development cycle. The initial 075 solved the from 0 to 1 problem of fielding a large deck amphibious assault ship, giving them mature helicopter-based amphibious assault capability. But its glaring weakness was a total lack of fixed-wing aircraft, meaning it couldn't conduct any kind of airstrike or air superiority mission at all. It was a transport, not a fighter. The subsequent 076 specifically plugged that gap by installing the world's first EM catapult on an amphibious ship, unlocking fixed wing launch and recovery. AA breakthrough in functionality. However, as a first-generation tech demonstrator, its power system was conservatively designed, which exposed the power margin deficiency we just talked about. A classic case of a Pathfinder model with inherent teething issues. And now the brand new 077. It is the fully mature Ultimate variant, synthesizing all the experience and hard lessons from the previous two, killing the power bottleneck for good, upgrading to a dual rail-M launch system, expanding to an 80,000-ton hull, fielding a dedicated tactical support aircraft, and establishing independent operational status, completely closing the loop on every prior weakness in one single stroke. This isn't evolution, this is revolution, executed with ruthless efficiency. Take a global view. This kind of leapfrog iterative capability is something only their military-industrial complex can pull off. Not many people know this, but the US Navy once proposed a 69,000-ton universal amphibious ship concept back in the day, also planning to carry an electromagnetic catapult. Combining amphibious landing with full-deck carrier-style strike, a concept that heavily overlaps with the 077 philosophy, but they ultimately had to abandon it because the technical hurdles were too high, the cost spiraled out of control, and system integration proved a nightmare. What the Americans once drew up couldn't actually build and didn't have the guts to realize that very concept is now being turned from paper into steel and reality. Step by the other side. That should piss you off, and it should scare you. 80,000-ton supersized hull, dual electromagnetic catapults. A high-low mix of purpose-built carrier aircraft, independent carrier-free combat operations, simultaneous amphibious landing, and strike capability. This top-tier configuration completely rewrites the standard for what a modern amphibious assault ship can do. And it fundamentally overturns the US amphibious warfare framework that we've honed for decades. From the 40,000-ton Pathfinder shaking down the tech to the 80,000-ton all-in-one combatant, from a single marginal catapult barely getting by to a dual-rail high-output powerhouse. From a support vessel with limited independent punch to a stand-alone naval centerpiece, the pace at which their amphibious equipment is evolving is rewriting the global record for naval development. And we are not keeping up. Now, after all that, I know a lot of you military fans are probably wondering, now that the fully realized 077 is on the horizon, 80,000 tons, carrier-level combat power, how the hell do we classify it? Is it still a traditional amphibious assault ship, or is it actually a medium-sized aircraft carrier in disguise? Or is it something entirely new? A hybrid that defies our existing categories and forces us to rethink our entire naval doctrine. The US scrapped its own universal amphibious ship proposal, but they actually made it happen. Do you think the 077's overall design is a steady, incremental refinement? Or is it a radical giant leap forward? I want to hear your take. Drop your thoughts in the comments section. And more importantly, what should the US Navy be doing right now to counter this? Because standing still is not an option. All right, that's it for today's deep dive. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay locked in.